The next stop on our deep brain train are these circumventricular organs. There are several circumventricular organs that are so named because they're located around the ventricles, around the periphery of the ventricles. And these are areas where so there, you know about the blood-brain barrier. There's also a CSF brain barrier, where CSF doesn't come into contact with the nervous system. It does so, though, in these particular areas here. The CSF brain barrier breaks down so that this is one pathway to get things into the brain tissue. Some of it good, like infection, some of it, or viruses. One of the areas that is kind of interesting is this area down here in the fourth ventricle. It's called the area postrema. If you stimulate the area postrema, you throw up. This is considered your vomiting center. And how it relates to vomiting, I don't think anybody really knows, unless there's some type of substance released into the CSF that stimulates the area postrema and you throw up. Regardless, if you stimulate the area postrema, you throw up. The other area that's interesting is the neurohypophysis. We'll talk about it later on. But this one right here is the pineal gland. The pineal gland is a midline structure in the back. As you age, the pinealocytes, they tend to take in calcium, and the pineal gland becomes calcified in older adults. The choroid plexus that makes CSF out of the ventricles, it also becomes calcified in older adults. And interestingly, when I was a student, there was no CT and no MRI. So there were only a couple of ways you could tell what was going on inside the skull, and one of them was to get a plain film of the skull, transverse view, and look for the presence of the calcified pineal gland and choroid plexus. This was known as brain sand. If you had a space-occupying lesion, these things, the pineal gland would shift off the midline. That's what you were looking for. Okay? Well, now that we have CTs and MRIs, who really cares about that? What does the pineal gland do? Well, you know, if you were I was watching TV last night, and I saw a show about these antelope-looking things with these spiral horns over there in the Serengeti, and how much they were like they're in a rut, and like, boy, you couldn't stop those little cowboys. They were good to go. Well, rut. Why is rut only part of the year for animals that have an estrous cycle versus the menstrual cycle? That's because of the light-dark cycle. The light-dark cycle. The pineal gland receives indirectly through the hypothalamus information on how much light is during the day and how much dark is during the day. And it has an effect on reproduction in lower animals. In us, it really doesn't have that much of an effect on reproduction because you have menstrual cycles. You get pregnant any time of year. So my gender, we don't walk around, like the deer, with the smelling the air. Oh, there's Jordan, she's receptive. That sort of thing. Unless there's a lesion of the pineal gland. And it describes here, if a tumor is in there, the pineal gland actually has a suppressive effect on reproduction. If there's a tumor, you wind up with delayed, in more pineal action, you wind up with delayed entry into puberty. If there is, a lesion of the pineal gland results in precocious puberty, so you have the development of secondary sex characteristics when you're 6 years old, and so on, that sort of thing. Okay? So that's one of the functions of the pineal gland. The other thing about the pineal gland, though, is that the thing that you're probably more familiar with is these are all of the things that the pinealocytes synthesize and release. Melatonin is the one that you're probably more familiar with in terms of induction of sleep. Again, here's the explanation about the retinal projections and how they may affect sleep or the release of melatonin, in addition to its effects on gonadal hormones. So, if we go back to this illustration, this mid-sagittal section through the deep brain structure, we see right here you see that little line right there? That's called the hypothalamic sulcus. Above the hypothalamic sulcus is the thalamus. Below it is the hypothalamus. This is all the hypothalamus here, ending in the stalk of the pituitary. If you look at the hypothalamus, it too, like the thalamus, is made up of numerous nuclei. I mentioned as we go through here several of these. There's mammillary bodies, or mammary bodies. Over here, there are a couple of other nuclei, the paraventricular, supraoptic nucleus, and I maybe mentioned the suprachiasmatic nucleus somewhere along the way. Each of these nuclei are responsible for different hypothalamic functions, but they're not as well delineated as the thalamus. Like, for example, when we talk about certain hormones that come from the pituitary, they can either come from the supraoptic or the paraventricular. They're not isolated. Okay? Now, one thing you need to understand, though, is that the relationship of the hypothalamus to the pituitary is different if you're referring to the anterior versus the posterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary, you see there's an artery that comes in here and breaks up into a capillary bed, and then it reconvenes into a vein and breaks up into a capillary bed again once it gets to the anterior pituitary. That's called the hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal system. A portal vein is a vein with a capillary bed on either side, like your hepatic portal vein. So the hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal vein. If we look here, where we're talking about right here. There's the mammillary bodies right there. There's the stalk of the pituitary. That's the hypothalamus right up underneath there. And the hypothalamus, since it sits there, you've got the thalamus at the top of the ventricles, the hypothalamus at the bottom. What you have to envision the hypothalamus as is a funnel. So if you've got a funnel here, if I've got a funnel, here's the third ventricle, right? So the thalamic nuclei are over here laterally on this side, and then they're going to be on that side too. And then they come down, and the funnel becomes solid here. This is the infundibulum, and there's the pituitary, anterior versus posterior. This area right here, where everything is funneling down, that's called the median eminence. median eminence. So you've got the hypothalamus, the median eminence, and the infundibulum here. So when you're trying to make sense of this as you're studying, those are three terms you're going to run into. Okay? The afferents to the hypothalamus. First, you've got afferents from the septal region. The septal region, if we draw the brain like that, here's the hypothalamus, right there. This is the septal region. So you have projections into it from right there. The septal region is intimately involved in the limbic system. So we've got emotions going into the hypothalamus. The fornix is another structure. If we look at this right here, there's the fornix. It's actually coming from the temporal lobe. We'll go over this more on Thursday. The fornix goes into the hypothalamus too. The temporal lobe is related to, I said, emotions, right? The fornix is going to dive into the mammillary bodies. It takes from the temporal lobe, the hippocampus in the temporal lobe, to the mammillary bodies. So you've got all this limbic stuff going in there to the hypothalamus. That's a big point. Emotions go into the hypothalamus. And then, of course, you've got things like from your environment. The parasympathetics, the vagus sensory goes into there. Kind of think of it as when you're eating food, there is an emotional aspect of food, right? You go to the ranch steakhouse, sit there with that 10-ounce filet, and if you're a vegan, then like eating a freaking carrot, and you just, I mean, it is a wonderful experience. There's a lot of emotional attachment to that, right? The thalamus relays sensation from your nipples, from your hearing, to the hypothalamus, because that's going to control lactation. Obviously, you've got somatic input from your genitals. And I'm going to tie this together in just a second here. How in the world did you get from the steakhouse to your genitals to your behavior? I'm going to tie this all together in just a second. Retinal afferents go there as well. And of course the vascular goes there as well. Again, we've always talked about your autonomics lets your brain know what's going on even though you don't know. Like you don't know how dilated your pudendal artery is now, but your brain does. Right? This is a circuit we're going to talk about more later on that involves the limbic structures. So you've got all this cortical input. You see all this cortical input goes into this structure here called the cingulate gyrus. The cingulate gyrus wraps around here to your hippocampus. The hippocampus goes back around to as the fornix into the mammillary bodies. The mammillary bodies go up to the anterior nucleus of the thalamus. I mentioned that earlier when we talked about thalamus. And from there it goes back to the cingulate gyrus. This loop here is called Papez circuit, P-A-P-E-Z, Papez circuit. The reason I bring this up, well, the reason this is all important is because your perceptions of the environment are out here. You have cognitive abilities to perceive your environment. The purpose of the limbic system is to use your memories to attach an emotion to your environment. That's what Peypes circuit does. It takes cortical input, and through this circuit, including the hippocampus, it attaches emotion to it based on your memories. Then that information is sent to the hypothalamus to carry out your physiologic response to the emotions that you've attached to your perceptions of the environment. That's why, when you get in here, that you get all these projections to the hypothalamus. The efferents from the hypothalamus go to the autonomic nervous system centers. That's how your body carries out a reaction to the emotions that you've attached to a sensation. So to give you an example, if we had, if I pulled out a rattlesnake, and just tossed it right there, you guys perceive what's going on in your environment. You've attached an emotion to it because through memories, you know that having a rattlesnake in your vicinity is probably not a good thing. So you send that emotional attachment to your environment, to the hypothalamus, where these autonomic centers are going to accelerate your heart rate, dilate your trachea, and get you moving. That's how it works. We'll talk about this later, but really the difference is between us, what makes you, and me, is the emotional attachment that we put on our environment. Everything else is the same. It's still a rattlesnake. Your emotional attachment might be different than yours. You might be one of those religious snake handlers. I don't know what religion they are, but you know what I'm talking about. Like in the Appalachian, they play with snakes, they hold snakes, they won't bite them because God will keep them safe. You might get up and go pick up the snake, knowing that it won't bite you. You may go, we run out the door. So that's what makes you two different. It has nothing to do with the cortex. You perceive the same thing. It's the limbic system that makes us different. Okay. Any questions about that? All right, pituitary gland. Pituitary gland has two different parts, the posterior and the anterior. They're derived from two different things. Back when you were about 5-6 weeks old, you had, here's the diencephalon right there. This is going to be the diencephalon. You had this little downward outpouching right there at the floor of what's going to be the brain. And then in the roof of your mouth, up here in the roof of your mouth, you had a diverticulum that developed going upwards. So you had one diverticulum going down and the other one going up. The one coming from your mouth is called Rathke's pouch. I don't know where that's written up there. Rathke's pouch, right there. And what that does is that it invaginates, forms a little structure, and ascends up until it finally meets up with the part that's coming down. Rathke's pouch gives rise to the anterior pituitary. This part gives rise to the posterior pituitary. So when they meet and you grow up, this is what it looks like. If you do a cross-section through the pituitary gland, you'll often find these little fluid-filled vesicles. Those fluid-filled vesicles are remnants of Rathke's pouch. Understand also that, like, you know, when we talk about thyroid development, it starts up here at the base of the tongue and descends down into your neck. But you can have ectopic thyroid tissue all the way down. You can have ectopic anterior pituitary tissue all the way up. So that's what this illustration shows right here. Now, the circuitry of the anterior and posterior pituitary is different. The anterior pituitary involves the hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal system. The posterior pituitary does not. If we first focus on the posterior pituitary, neurons that are up here in the supraoptic paraventricular nucleus project down to the posterior pituitary directly. Their nerve terminals are in the posterior pituitary. They release OxyContin and not OxyContin. Oxytocin and vasopressin directly into the capillary bed of the posterior pituitary. The projections of these other hypothalamic nuclei are in the median eminence. Oh, excuse me. They're in the nuclear groups, and their axons end in the median eminence, right here. So they release their substances into the median eminence. It gets picked up by this capillary bed, transported to the anterior pituitary, and bathe the pituocytes in the anterior pituitary. So vasopressin and oxytocin are released directly from the posterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary has to have an inhibitory or facilitatory substance released in the median eminence to bathe them in order to make them products. This is the posterior pituitary right here. If we look at oxytocin, it does two things. One is that it stimulates uterine contraction. Pitocin is a synthetic oxytocin used for induction of labor. Oxytocin or pitocin is what you use if there's postpartum hemorrhage to clamp down that uterus. Oxytocin also initiates the milk letdown reflex by stimulating the myocytes that line the breast, outside the breast ducts that we talked about before. It causes them to contract. Vasopressin, or antidiuretic hormone, does exactly what it says. And if you can't remember, which one does what, just think of the name. Antidiuretic. That means you won't pee. If you have too much antidiuretic, you won't pee. That's the syndrome of inappropriate ADH. If you don't have enough vasopressin, you will pee. That's diabetes insipidus. Just think, and the way you remember it is, what is common to all diabetics? Polyuria. Diabetes insipidus is polyuria. If you're polyuric, that means that you must have no antidiuretic hormone. Okay? So you just kind of work those through in your mind. Vasopressin also happens to be the most powerful peripheral vasoconstrictor known to physiology. We used to use it a lot during codes. So if you're in cardiac arrest, I give you a shot of vasopressin, and that constricts that shunts the blood to the core. Well, that's no longer used that way, but it is more powerful a vasoconstrictor than is epinephrine. The anterior pituitary, you go down through here, you should know what these are. Let's start with this one. Prolactin is the hormone, obviously, that induces milk production. Prolactin inhibitory hormone. Prolactin inhibitory hormone is dopamine from the arcuate nucleus. So if we go back here, that would be like dopamine is released into the median eminence. It shuts down prolactin development. Years ago, there was, for women who did not want to breastfeed and wanted to dry up their breast, there was a drug that was used, I can't remember the name of it right offhand, but what it is the dopamine agonist, and it would just shut down prolactin, it would shut down milk production. Okay? Back in my mom's days, breastfeeding was not a big issue. I saw an interesting thing on TV that night, speaking of breastfeeding. You guys ever seen this show? It's called Adam Ruins Everything. Have you seen that show? He takes topics and he debunks them. He provides the evidence to show you that there's bullshit. And it's incredible, well done show. Like one show would be voting. Why should you vote? Is it worth spending your time to vote? Well, he tells you that in some states, it really isn't. In other states, it very much is, because your vote counts more than one in some states because of just the electoral college and all this other stuff. He did a thing on doctor shows, like Dr. Oz. He says these things are the horrible shows because what they do is that they don't take real science. They take junk science, and he goes into how junk science can get published in these obscure, stupid journals, and then they take that junk science and they try to, that's what's sensationalized on these doctor shows. These shows are horrible for perpetuating myth about things. The last one I saw last week was on breastfeeding. That the thing to debunk was that bottle feeding is okay. And these lactation consultants, they are rabid about breastfeeding. That the hospitals are actually graded on the breastfeeding that they accomplish in labor, in the obstetrics department. And they used to send people home on all sorts of things like samples of Enfamil and all this kind of stuff. They don't do it anymore. But actually what he was on the show was it is perfectly fine to bottle feed an infant. There is no benefit whatsoever to breastfeeding. And he gave all of this information, really interesting. And these things are published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, stuff like that. If you get a chance to watch this show, it's interesting. We tell you that breast milk, you transfer the IgA antibodies, that's bullshit. There's no evidence to support that whatsoever. This is crazy. There's no immunologic evidence to support breastfeeding. I didn't know that. So, of course, his show may be BS, but I don't know. He seems to make a pretty good point, and at the corner up here, as he goes through and describes things, they list the citations. So, yeah, you should watch it. Okay, prolactin releasing hormone is the facilitator hormone. Growth hormone releasing hormone, inhibitory hormone, deals with just growth hormone from the anterior pituitary. Gonadotropin releasing hormone causes the release of both LH and FSH. I hope that you learned in OBGYN physiology the difference between the two in terms of follicle maturation, the LH surge causing ovulation, and the slight spike in temperature. TSH is going to be coming from the anterior pituitary, but it's driven by thyrotropin releasing hormone. And then when you get over here, you have corticotrophin releasing hormone that produces a long protein that is cleaved into different things. One of the products that is cleaved into is ACTH, which, as you know now, has such a profound effect on the different zonular layers of the adrenal cortex. It also, you get things like beta-lipotrophin or the endorphins, the runner's high. That's all derived from the anterior pituitary. This summarizes all of them right here. So you should definitely be aware of what does what to whom. Other hypothalamic functions, satiety, turning on and turning off the desire to eat. You've ingested enough calories, you can stop now. A lot of this has to do with your blood sugar level, which is also in there. Osmoreceptors, you know that the osmotic pressure of the blood, the ability to retain or lose sodium to maintain that, comes from the hypothalamus. ACTH, because you regulate ACTH, right? ACTH is going to regulate aldosterone. The autonomics we've already mentioned, the parasympathetics and the sympathetics are driven by the hypothalamus. You know, when we talk about the preganglionic sympathetics being between T1 and L2, the preganglionic parasympathetics being in cranial nerve 3, 7, 9, 10, and S2, 3, 4, what drives them? The hypothalamus. They don't sit out there and just act by themselves. They're driven by the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus drives your autonomics, which is your body's response to the environment. We know about temperature regulation. The hypothalamus has a genetic set point. Your set point in your hypothalamus keeps your body at 98.6. Yours, that you inherited from your parents, your normal temperature may be 98.2. Yours may be 98.9. So your set point can be different, but it's all determined by the hypothalamus. When the temperature of the blood in the hypothalamus changes, or there's something in the blood that causes the hypothalamus to change it, like cytokines and things like that, inflammatory mediators from infection, the hypothalamus will program a new set point and cause the autonomics to get you there. If mediators reach the hypothalamus and say, oh, I've got this infection going on, I need to increase my temperature from 98.6 to 102. The way your hypothalamus does that is they send that information back down to the autonomics to constrict your blood vessels, to sweat, to not sweat, to retain heat, to let heat go. That's how you regulate your temperature. And it's the hypothalamus, due to mediators, that will create that new set point. When the mediators go away, it resets it back to the genetic norm. Sleep, we've talked about the retino-suprachiasmatic. So the retina, I mentioned earlier, has a direct projection to the hypothalamus. That was on that ideal slide. It's to the suprachiasmatic nucleus. The retina projects there. So you, regardless of where you are in the phylogenetic ladder, you do respond to light dark. It's just not as strong as you as it is in lower mammals. And then obviously behavior is in there. So here's the bottom line. Every second, every millisecond of every day, your cortex perceives the environment, attaches an emotion to everything. The feel of that table on your left elbow, the feel of that chair on your boot top region, the vision that you're seeing right now, the sound of the background noise in this room, my voice in this room. You have tens of thousands of inputs that are occurring every millisecond of every day. The limbic system puts an emotion. You're sitting there quietly. You're not ranting and raving. You're not farting. You have an emotion attached to where you are. And your body's dealing with it in terms of your heart rate, peripheral vascular, your respiratory rate, and that sort of thing. Okay? And where we differ is in the limbic system. The limbic system, how do you change the limbic system? A lot of the patterning of the limbic system is determined by what we're taught. What is normal? There's a genetic component to it because you have people that are, you look at some families like the Amazing Whites of Westbury, their whole family tree is full of criminals. There's got to be some environment and genetics to that. God bless their little 14 chromosomes. Learn and hormonal. Hormonal. That's interesting. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so how we process our environment, or makes you, is where you fit on every imaginable continuum. Every imaginable continuum, that's what makes you. Take public speaking. Kimberly Just yesterday, crime board, she says she hasn't lectured in 20 years because she has a fear of public speaking. It took me 20 years to convince her to come in here to lecture. I can get up and talk in front of anybody. It doesn't bother me, not one single bit. That's a continuum. Deja vu, you know deja vu, there's something that's happened. There's no such thing as deja vu. It didn't happen. If you think, oh wait a minute, I just had a feeling that he was going to say that about that. You can't, if you go back to that session of where you think you remember, you can't remember anything in front of it or back of it. You can't, there's no such thing, you weren't there. There's no deja vu. What you had was an hallucination. I'm sorry, but you weren't there. That was an hallucination. So most people have deja vu. Maybe what? Once a year, once every 6 months, once a quarter, once a week, several times a day, all the time now that I hear somebody talking to me. That's the continuum between every once in a while having a hallucination to having a persistent hallucination with schizophrenia. Where you fit on that continuum makes you you. The next one, this is what I don't understand. How can you take an adult and you look at a continuum? Well, let's go beyond sexual desire for predator. Let's say pedophile. I can look at a boy, and that does nothing. You're a boy. Most of the thing you are is a freaking irritation. Versus this end, this person who sees that boy as a sexual object. That's a continuum. So wherever you fit, if you were to line up 1,000,000 different continuums, where you fit on there is what makes us different. And where you fit on there is determined by your limbic system. Let me go back to the hormonal thing here in just a second. And this is, I've done this for years, and my wife knows I do this. It's not sexist, it's just a freaking matter of fact. And she knows it. If you want to talk to her about it, I'll give you 473-3757. That's a cell phone number. You can call her and tell her about it. Talk to her about it. The largest density of estrogen receptors in your body, including females, is in your brain. Estrogen has an effect on the nervous system. Everybody recognizes there's an endocrine system and there's a nervous system, and then there is a neuroendocrine system, because one influences the other. We already talked about the nervous system driving the endocrine system. GnRH drives LH-FSH, right? If the follicle is maturing, part of what the follicle is made of are estrogen and progesterone producing cells. That has an effect up in your brain. I think most people would agree that people can, if you're looking at the menstrual cycle, people can fluctuate in a month in terms of their attitudes. Not just the physical things like swelling, but behavioral things as well. This is known as, obviously, premenstrual syndrome. It's a real thing. The most severe form of premenstrual syndrome is called PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, where the irritation, all these symptoms, they're way out of line. This is recognized. I mean, these are real syndromes. Actually, the neurohormonal fluctuation in behavior is a legitimate defense for murder. You can Google PMS as a defense, a successful defense, I might add, for murder. Well, my wife has PMDD. She's batshit crazy. Well, she was. She's not so much now because she's older. That's why I always told her that I've written on a piece of paper that if I'm ever turned up dead, don't let her use this as a defense, because I've told her you have it, and you can't use it as a defense if you know you have it. These people didn't know they had it. She didn't think she had it until she was reading. I got a PA journal one time that was about PMDD, and it listed the 14 symptoms of signs of PMDD. She took that in the bathroom to read the article. It turns out she started crying because when she came out, she had all 14 of them. So, you only needed 6. She had all of them. So we sat out one night and we mapped out her craziness, her PMDD. Some days of the month, she's normal, and I even put that in quotation marks. And then, right along somewhere in here, if we know her period's going to be over here, right along in here, she enters this phase called Chatty Kelly. That I'll come home and say, how was your day, dear? Oh, well, it was a blah, 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 and she'll talk for 2 hours, and I've already, I've gone to change the oil in the car. She's still talking when I come back in. Just blah, blah, blah. And so it's amazing. She just goes on and on and on about nothing. And now the interesting thing is she recognizes when she's Chatty Kelly. After an hour of talking about nothing, she'll say, oh, I'm Chatty Kelly, aren't I? Yep, you are. So, then she moves into a few days of insomnia, and it is the worst insomnia you can imagine. She will not sleep for 2 days. It's horrible. And this is a horrible process here for her. It's really bad, and then because of the absence of sleep, she develops Mongo irritability. That, you know, like, how was your day, dear? And then because she hasn't slept for 2 days, she develops a menstrual migraine. And this menstrual migraine puts her in bed for literally 2 days. It's really, it responds to triptans, but it's constant. And that happens a few days before her period starts. And then she enters this dysthymic phase. It's like a major depression type stage where she won't get out of bed. She doesn't have headaches. She just has no motivation to do anything. And then she has a period, and then she's back to normal. So, I should say that this chatty phase right here, the thing that, so she's grown out of most of these symptoms now because she's perimenopausal. So these symptoms have gotten much less, which they tend to do. But also in the chatty phase, she has she's crafty. I have, in the back room, for the pool house room there are more half-finished projects in that room than you can ever imagine. You notice the bathroom in our, you know when she started remodeling the bathroom, if you went over to the house? What month is this now? 5 months ago? She just cannot, and I am not going to finish another project that she started because of her crafty mood. She always starts these in that phase. She would get crafty and say, okay, I need to make curtains for the front room. You know, our front room doesn't have curtains. But I'm going to make curtains for the front room. So she goes out and buys, you know, $500 worth of curtain material and a sewing machine. Yeah, no idea how to sew. No idea how to operate a sewing machine. This will last 2 days. So she fiddled with it for 2 days, and the next thing you know, she's out of that mood. No curtain. Material. Curtain rods, a sewing machine. You know how many sewing machines we've owned in our 17, 18-year marriage? 5 sewing machines. She still doesn't know how to sew. 5 sewing machines. I'm not kidding you. Call her, you don't believe it. 473-37. All right, any questions?